There is a painting so strange, even the greatest art historian of the 20th century admitted defeat trying to explain it. He said it was like unlocking a door and still not finding what was behind it. 500 years later, nobody has found it either, and the deeper you look into it, the stranger it gets. This is the Garden of Earthly Delights, painted by Hieronymus Bosch, sometime around 1490 to 1510. It's a triptych, nearly 4 meters wide when fully open, covered edge to edge with hundreds of tiny figures. Even the exact measurements are disputed. Different museum records list different numbers for a painting. This famous, it's one of the strangest paintings ever made, and one of the least understood. That art historian was Erwin Panofsky, one of the most respected scholars of the last century. His exact words, "We have bored a few holes through the door of the locked room, but somehow we do not seem to have discovered the key." He wrote that after spending years studying this exact painting. The painting isn't just one image, it's a triptych, 3 wooden panels, hinged together like a folding altarpiece, meant to open and close. Closed, it shows a single scene, painted almost entirely in grey. The earth still half-formed, floating inside a transparent glass sphere, the 3rd day of creation, before God had even made the sun or the moon. A line of Latin script arches across the top, like a caption for a world that isn't finished yet. The whole scene is painted small and precise, almost like a medieval manuscript illustration blown up to the size of a door. That's why there is no colour yet. There is nothing to light it. Then you open it, and everything changes at once. The left panel shows the Garden of Eden. God stands between 2 figures, presenting a newly created Eve to Adam, who's just waking up. In the background, a handful of unusual animals are already wandering the landscape. Even paradise, in Bosch's hands, isn't entirely calm. The colours here are soft, almost pastel, nothing like what's coming next. It looks peaceful on the surface, almost conventional for a painting about to become anything but. The centre panel is the one people mean when they talk about this painting. It's packed wall to wall, with nude figures, dozens of them, maybe more than can even be counted. They're eating fruit, giant strawberries, oversized berries, far bigger than any real fruit. Some big enough for a person to sit inside. Most historians read this as something less innocent than a snack. Owls show up again and again, tucked into the scene, almost as often as the people perched on figures' heads, staring out from inside hollow trees, watching from the water's edge. In Bosch's time, an owl wasn't wise. It was a creature of darkness, something that chose night over light, on purpose. Fountains pour water straight into people's open mouths. Figures crawl inside oversized eggshells, or ride birds too large to be any species that actually exists. Everywhere you look, something delicate is about to break. Historians have tried counting the individual figures crammed into this one panel alone. Most counts land somewhere over 100, though nobody agrees on an exact number. There are simply too many, packed too close together, doing too many different things at once. It's beautiful, and it's unsettling. And after 5 centuries of study, nobody fully agrees on which one it's supposed to be. Here's something most people don't expect. Nobody actually knows who commissioned this painting. No contract survives. No letter, no name written down anywhere. The leading theory points to the House of Nassau, most likely a nobleman named Henry III of Nassau, or possibly his uncle before him. In 1517, a travelling Italian churchman named Antonio de Beatis toured their palace in Brussels and wrote the painting down in his diary. That's the very first record that it existed at all. Not a commissioned document, just a tourist's notes. But that's still just a theory, not a confirmed fact. Some historians think it might have been commissioned instead by the Brotherhood of Our Lady, a religious confraternity in Bosch's own hometown that he belonged to for most of his adult life. Either way, a painting this elaborate, and 500 years later, we still don't even know who paid for it. And none of that is even the strangest part of this painting. The 3rd panel is hell, and buried inside it, easy to miss if you're not looking closely, is one detail stranger than anything in the other 2 panels combined. There is a man crushed underneath the giant lute and painted directly onto his bare skin. In real musical notation, it is an actual song. The right panel is Hell, and it's built around one central figure art historians just call the Tree Man. His body is a cracked, hollowed out shell, like an eggshell that's already split open. He's balanced on two legs that aren't legs at all. They're rotting tree trunks, planted straight into the water below him. There is a disc balanced on his head like a hat, and on top of it, tiny demons parade around a bagpipe. Inside his hollow torso, more figures sit drinking at a table, as if his own body were a tavern. Around him, the rest of the panel burns actual fires in the background, throwing orange light across everything, while he stays pale and grey, almost the same colour as the closed exterior of the whole triptych. Some historians think his face might be a self-portrait of Bosch himself. The theory comes from art historian Hans Belting, who points to the slightly turned head, the expression, something almost like the artist looking back out at us from inside his own vision of hell. A separate pen and ink drawing by Bosch of a nearly identical tree man survives too, proving he came back to this exact figure more than once. But the self-portrait claim itself is still just a theory and completely unprovable. No one will ever know for certain if Bosch put himself inside his own hell. Nearby, there is a war machine built out of two enormous human ears, pierced straight through by a blade between them, grinding forward on wheels and crushing the crowd underneath it. Most readings agree on this one. It stands for people who heard every warning in life and chose to ignore it anyway. And almost every other punishment in this panel involves music. A man is crucified across the strings of a giant harp, his body bent to fit the frame. Another is trapped inside the body of a lute itself. There is a hurdy-gurdy being cranked by a blind figure, while another sinner is mangled inside its mechanism, a bagpipe, a drum, each instrument turned into a torture device, built specifically for people who loved secular music a little too much while they were alive. Which brings us back to that man crushed underneath the lute, with music actually written across his skin. In 2014, a college student in Oklahoma photographed that exact passage from a high-resolution scan of the painting, transcribed the notes by hand, and had it performed on real instruments, lute, harp, and hurdy-gurdy. 500 years after Bosch painted it, someone finally played the song, written on a man's body, in hell. Getting this painting from that Brussels palace to Spain took a war. In 1568, the Dutch rebelled against Spanish rule. The Spanish governor sent to crush the revolt was the Duke of Alba, and he set up a special tribunal officially called the Council of Troubles, though almost everyone at the time just called it the Council of Blood, for how many people it condemned. Alba confiscated property from the rebel leader's family as punishment, and this painting was part of what he took. It passed to Alba's own illegitimate son, who kept it in his private collection for over 20 years. Then, in 1591, after that son died, King Philip II bought the painting at his estate sale. 2 years later, Philip gave it away again, this time to El Escorial, the massive monastery palace he'd built for himself, just outside Madrid, part royal residence and part mausoleum. It stayed locked inside those walls for the next 342 years, seen by almost no one outside the royal court. And it almost didn't survive that long at all. By the time Philip acquired it, Spain was deep in the Counter-Reformation, actively hunting for heresy in art, books, even private letters. This was the era of banned book lists, when suspect artwork could be quietly destroyed without much explanation. A painting covered in nude bodies and demons was exactly the kind of object that got burned. It survived because of one monk. The monastery's own librarian, a man named Fray José de Sigüenza, wrote a formal defense of the painting for the record, arguing it wasn't heretical at all, just a moral warning against sin, dressed up a spectacle to make the lesson unforgettable. Nobody knows if he actually believed that, or if he simply understood exactly what he had to say to keep it from being destroyed. Either way, it worked, which brings us back to the argument that's still going on today. 500 years later, among people who study this painting for a living, art historian Ludwig von Baldus sided with Sigüenza, read the triptych left to right as innocence, then sin, then punishment, a straightforward warning about where lust leads. Others disagree completely. In 1947, historian Wilhelm Frenger argued the center panel isn't showing sin at all, that it might depict a return to Eden's innocence, tied to a real but obscure religious sect, but believed pleasure itself could be practiced without guilt. A more recent theory from historian Randert Falkenberg splits the difference. Maybe it isn't a warning or a paradise. Maybe it's a puzzle Bosch built on purpose, meant to make you sit with the discomfort of not knowing. It's not a comfortable answer, but it might be the most honest one anyone has offered yet. 3 respected historians, 3 different centuries of looking at the same 3 panels, and still 3 completely different answers, which is exactly where Panofsky ended up too, after years spent trying to find the key. Today the painting hangs permanently open in the Prado, in Madrid, the outer panels folded back, so almost nobody who sees it in person ever sees the grey, unfinished world painted on the outside anymore. The version most people know is only ever the loud one. Paradise, chaos, and hell, permanently open, permanently on display. Nobody knows who paid for it. Nobody fully agrees on what it means. Even now, the man who probably saved it from destruction may not have even believed his own defense of it. And somewhere in the middle of all that uncertainty, there is still a piece of real, playable music, hidden on a sinner's body for 500 years, waiting for someone patient enough to actually look. Maybe that's the only thing about this painting. Nobody argues about somebody. Eventually, always finds what's hidden in it. So warning, paradise, or riddle. What do you think Bosch actually meant?